All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and start. My name is Dr. Dennis Johnson. I am the Senior Vice President of Programs and Partnerships here at HBCU 20 by 20, or as some people know us as the application. It is an honor to be here with you today. Again, happy Black History Month. Today, we will be giving you a wonderful presentation. First, I just want to start off just giving you all an overview of HBCU 20 by 20. So we are an organization that was founded in 2017 by our president and CEO, Nicole Tinson, who will be facilitating today's meeting. Nicole went to Dillon University at HBCU in New Orleans, and after that went to Yale. And what she noticed was that the companies that came to Yale came with red carpet and champagne. So she created HBCU 20 by 20 to balance the playing field. What originally started as a campaign is now a permanent organization that serves over 25,000 HBCU students and recent graduates. We are a national organization that works in every industry. As I like to say it, from animation to biotechnology, you can find us. The really cool thing about HBCU 20 by 20 and the application is that our number one goal is to be able to bring resources and opportunities to communities of color. We are known for our mock interviews, which are now taking place. So if you know any student who needs some professional development or an employer who's looking to give back, please contact me. I will have my email available at the end of this event today, as well as our fellowship programs, which are amazing. They're 4 to 8 week professional development programs that are paid that also really get students into the opportunities in which they deserve. We offer job postings as well as our free college application. So students can apply to HBCUs, a select few through us, get accepted and be tracked all 4 years. In other words, be supported when it comes to their academic and career resources. But at the end of the day, you all, we need you. We can only exist if we need you. And I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, our president and CEO, who will be taking care of you today.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Dr. Dennis, just for taking the time out to provide that overview of HBCU 20 by 20. I'd like to acknowledge our interpreters, Ambrose, as well as Derek, who will be exchanging in and out of our conversation just to make sure that we're accessible and everyone is able to enjoy this conversation. Something that was important or brought to our attention is to talk about what we look like before we even dive into the conversation. So I am an African-American woman, age 33. I wear a short haircut. Typically in the African-American community, we call this a fade. My hair is dyed. I have on a houndstooth dress. And I'm just really excited about this conversation. So Black and disabled, creating equity in overlooked spaces. As Dr. Johnson mentioned, we've been around for 6 years, going on 7 years. And this conversation is something that we have always had in mind to use and to talk about. And when we were able to connect with the National Organization on Disability, we thought about what it would mean to have this kind of conversation, it was a no-brainer for us. I grew up with a mother who had disabilities, both physical, she couldn't speak. So being able to navigate the world with my mother as an advocate for her shed a lot of light on the inequities that exist, especially within the workforce. So being able to do the workforce development work that we do today, and being able to have this conversation about how not only employers, but students, faculty members, staff can also play a role in just creating a more inclusive work environment. It's something that's critical, not only just for our society, but also something that's personal to me and something that's important to me. This being said, we've pulled together a dynamic panel today just to talk about what they have seen, what they have done, what they have experienced, and how we all can move forward collectively. That being said, I'd like to just bring up our first panelist. So we'll start with Candace. Candace, if you will, maybe just come off mute, describe yourself, introduce yourself, and just talk about why this conversation is important to you. So just so that we can lay that groundwork and contextualize this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. And good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to whomever's on the call. As Nicole said, my name is Candace Nash, and I am an African-American female I am 53 years old and I wear my hair in locks. They're actually up in a bun on the top of my head. And I have on black glasses, a maroon shirt with yellow letters. I'm a D&I leader, diversity and inclusion leader at Toyota headquarters, and I'm located in Plano, Texas. And I'm really honored and excited to be here with you today. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very passionate about helping others in many spaces, specifically around the education, the execution of strategy in the D&I spaces, right? And not just strategy, but moving to action. Strategy is really just the first part, but really where the rubber meets the road is where we turn that strategy into applicable action. So a couple of other quick notes about me. I'm a proud Jersey girl, born and raised. Purdue Boilermaker, but today I'm representing my mother's HBCU. She is an undergrad alum of Central State University. So for all the marauders out there, I say hello to you. So it's an important topic to me because, again, with my passion for helping other people, I think it's really, really important that we educate and that we amplify, right, what the needs are, what the opportunities are, and then just really creating spaces in those areas of education where we can move to action, right? So whether it's talking to organizations like Toyota in terms of what we're doing, talking with great organizations like NOD about the resources they have and what benefit they can be. So it's just really important to just amplify and educate. And I think we're going to have a great conversation today.
Thank you so much, Candace, just for joining us today. Next, I'd like to highlight or spotlight Natalie Dickens, who is a recent alumna of Jackson State University and who also won HBCU 20 by 20's pitch competition last year. So we'll dive into that a little bit more later. But Natalie, if you can, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie. As Nicole just said, I am a recent alumni of Jackson State University. My major was mass communications, my concentration being media production, and right now I'm in Michigan working at Real Time Media with producing some articles and stories for the Michigan Chronicle. So during my time at Jackson State, I faced a couple of, difficulties at the school because a lot of things were not set up for students who may have had like invisible disabilities. And so during my time, I became really close with other people working in disability services. And it really sparked just a lot of interest in how colleges can change and become more accessible for me. So
Thank you so much for joining us as well. And last but not least, we have Felicia from the NOD.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you everyone for being here. I could not be more thrilled to be here, to have had the opportunity really to partner with HBCU on this very important conversation webinar today. I am a white woman. I have just below shoulder kind of blonde hair. I wear black glasses, and I do identify as a person with a disability. I have a hearing impairment that I wear hearing aids. I also have mental health disabilities and ADD. So very happy to be here to have this conversation. As I said, when we think about why it's important to me, that is really, I'm going to give a short answer to a very long, long and packed question is what I will say. So it's hard for me to provide more of a straightforward answer for that because there's still so much work to do to achieve equity, especially when we're looking at people of color with disabilities and for those whose socioeconomic position makes access to healthcare, education, work, all of these systems that were built for people without disabilities. I do believe that we are stronger together, and by having these conversations, really understanding what equity means. And equity is about looking at that person as an individual and being able to provide the services that that person needs, services addressing that individual's needs. I like to say that once you've met one person with a disability, you have met one person with a disability. I have I have the same disabilities as others have, but I can guarantee that it manifests differently within myself than it does with anybody else. So really, really looking forward to delving in a little bit deeper. So thank you, Nicole.
Thank you for being here as well. So I'm going to dive right in, and I'm going to start with Candace. And this question will be posed for all our panelists, but what does creating equity within the space of disability look like to you? So I know that that's also kind of a large question that can be answered in a multitude of ways, but just what is something that comes to mind for you initially when you hear that question?
Thank you for the question, Nicole. So for me, it's really about understanding what the needs are and then taking action. So you'll probably hear me throughout this conversation say that quite a bit, right? I think what we just heard Felicia say is really important. When you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. And so you need to understand, kind of where people are and then create plans of action that meet people where they are. I'm really excited, and I know I don't want to steal thunder from future questions and answers, but, identifying partners like NOD, right? We can't do it alone, and you cannot do it in a vacuum. So identifying partners like NOD, National Organization on Disability, really help organizations like Toyota really bring those strategies and those needs to action, right? We do a lot internally in terms of voice of the customer. We have a fantastic partner in externally, they're called ERGs or employee resource groups, but we internally call them business partnering groups because just the way we work with our BPGs or our version of affinity groups with aligning with the business, we call them BPGs. So just so you understand the acronyms that I'm using. But we have one in the disability space called Toyotability, and we work very closely with Toyotability to really understand what the needs are for our employees enterprise-wide, right? We have employees that are building cars. We have employees that are sitting in offices. We have employees that are sitting home some of the time now. We're in a hybrid work environment like myself. So it's really important that in terms of equity, we understand what the needs are. We hear from the voice of the customer, and then we partner closely with organizations like NOD to help identify what are some of the best actions that we can take. We also have other partners internally, such as our legal team and HR, right? Some of the usual organizational partners that you would work with, but groups like NOD really, really help us shore up making sure that we're taking care of equity in a responsible way.
Thank you so much for that. I think that I love that you contextualize it within the workforce, so that, and I know that we'll dive into it more. So thank you for that. Natalie, I'd like to ask you the same question. Can you just talk a little bit more about what does creating equity within the space of disability look like to you?
Yeah, so I would say that creating equity, and I think that for me, it looks like being able to understand where people are coming from without having to experience it entirely, being able to train, professors and people who are going to be dealing with these students to understand and look at what they may be going through and to be able to listen. Because I think that when you don't know anybody with a disability, when you're going about your day-to-day life, you don't think about how something might, get in the way of someone else succeeding in the same spaces as you. And I think that just from my experience at Jackson State's campus, sometimes I don't think that even the buildings and the way things are structured have people with disabilities in mind.
Thank you so much, Natalie, just for sharing that with us as well. And, I think that we'll certainly dive more into what campuses can do to be more inclusive. So we're really excited to also welcome Derek as an interpreter today. So thank you, Derek, for also being here. And Felicia, I'd like to just pose that same question to you. Is just, what does creating equity look like, just in your opinion?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to build on a little bit of what Natalie was saying, and particularly as it relates to education. We did a Campus to Careers program. It was a 4-year demonstration project where we partnered with 11 employers, 15 colleges throughout Massachusetts to really look at what is what's happening as far as students with disabilities making the transition to work, and how can we work to build that bridge. One of the things that we realized is that we're not all talking to each other. uh, we need for our businesses, for our disability services, for our career services, and our students to all be talking to understand how do we do outreach, and why is it important to bring people with disabilities into those conversations. We did a lot of research. We saw that when we look at students with disabilities, particularly Black students with disabilities, the undergrad percentage of students is about 18% throughout the U.S. versus 82% without disabilities. And then post baccalaureate, it is 10.2% versus almost 90%. So that tells us there's a lot of, again, I'm always going to come back to, there's a lot of work for us to do, but equity it means that those numbers go up. We continue to make changes systemically, as well as looking to change hearts and minds around the stigma of people with disabilities. Understanding that it may not be apparent, it's non-apparent. However, we still need to provide the level of accommodation or systemic accommodations in order for all of us to be productive, and in order for all of us to have access to equal opportunity.
Thank you so much just for providing that context as well. And, I think that when we're able to root things also in data, it really just sheds light on the inequities that exist. But aside from the inequities, something else that tends to be prevalent, especially in today's world, is social media.
Mhm.
And I think that for me, something that was important when we visited Jackson State University last year. I mean, we hosted our pitch competition. Natalie presented about autism awareness and utilizing social media to raise awareness about it. She had a PowerPoint presentation. We had a panel of judges from our corporate partners, and everyone was just, it was a point of entry where we realized that we never thought about advocacy through the lens of using social media and how we can all be allies in a way. So Natalie, I'd love if you can just talk about not only like what you presented, but beyond that, how social media can be a tool for all of us to utilize to create equity within the disability space.
Yes, so I think that me, especially now coming from college, now I actually work in social media and I utilize different platforms daily. I think that one of the biggest tools that it's given us is the ability to connect with, in some sense, other people. And so I guess going back to what I was saying about how if you don't know someone who is disabled, you go about your life through a very narrow lens of you perceive the world how you perceive it. And if you don't struggle with this specific thing, you don't see a need for X solution. And I think that one of the biggest things that social media offers us is the ability to listen to other people and what they are going through, what's helpful for them, and to see other people's perspective. It definitely allows you to have, this is maybe how you see the world, but then you might be able to expand that, based on what you can gather from other people's experiences. And when you're in person, that's limited sometimes. You can go about your day-to-day life in person and never have that opportunity to listen to someone else who you may not even cross paths with. And I think that it can be very productive to have conversations through social media because you have the whole like this whole new world of all of these different people who you can converse with and you can, bounce ideas off of, and things that you never would have thought of. Now you're having a whole active conversation. I think that it could be a very useful tool for education. And I think that for a lot of people, it's very stimulating, it's very engaging. Whereas, you might not be inclined to pursue or seek that information out on your own. It's kind of brought to you through social media. And so during my project, and I talked about how there's been a rise of conversation regarding autism, and how that can affect students and how that can affect you in your career. I've seen a lot of conversation about autism friendly career paths to go down, things like that would have never crossed anyone's mind. And it's helped a lot of people who are autistic, who are adults who don't have diagnosis, get diagnosis, because a lot of people don't know what these disabilities even look like, especially if it's one that can go for so many years without being recognized, especially in Black women. A lot of Black women are not diagnosed with autism until later on in life, until they're adults. And so, having a community of people who can bring this information to you, and talk to you and answer questions, it's very helpful.
So I wanted to just ask one follow-up question before we move to Felicia's question, but just Natalie, how does someone dive into it? Is it just like, I have an idea that I want to bring attention to, let me just like put it out there? Is it like, let me put my phone up and just record something really quickly? Like what advice do you have? Because I know that sometimes that can be a little nerve-wracking.
I think that is something that I struggle with a lot. Being someone in, a Gen Zer, I grew up using social media and using the internet from a very young age. And I've always wanted to get my foot in the conversation, but I was always kind of like, oh, I'm kind of nervous. And you don't know, especially when you're dealing with topics like disabilities or, mental health. It's not really, in my opinion, it's not always smart to just, pick up the phone and start speaking. That can cause a lot of issues. I think that the best way to go about it is, for me, I think that it's very easy, especially on an algorithm like TikToks, to be presented with that information naturally sometimes. And so that's kind of how it happened with me. I think my algorithm knew what I liked to see. And so it's like, if you come across a video or someone reposts a video and you're interested in finding out more information, a lot of times you can leave a comment on someone's page and they will respond to you, be very happy to respond to you. And then also a lot of times the information I learn on TikTok, I take it off TikTok. I go find, more information somewhere else. I think that's very important for a lot of people, it's good to use TikTok as a starting point sometimes. Sometimes it can bring you information and perspectives that you've never heard before. And so something you can ponder about, but it is good to go off and speak to other people. Like for me, I got really involved with my disability services at Jackson State. I had expanded my knowledge from what I had essentially seen online, and I basically solely got that curiosity from my use of being online. And I think when you're very passionate about something, when you're really you have a lot of knowledge about something, or you just are learning, I think that it makes you very excited to put that information out there. And I think that, recently with my job, I have started to make videos myself, regular videos. I just did a video about how human trafficking affects Black women and girls specifically. I would have never wanted to share my research or share my information on social media had it not been for people around me encouraging me to put my ideas out there. So yeah, I think that it's really good to make sure that you're engaging with other people online, asking questions, and then also like expand in person, like what resources you have in person to learn more before really diving into, voicing your opinions online. And like, being an active member of the conversation can sometimes be going to, things like the pitch competition, being able to say, oh, I'm very interested in this topic, so I'm going to start here. And I think that's really helpful.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for shedding light on that. I think that we often think about content creation, but content consumption and how that can educate us and even spark even more interest in what we can learn and what other resources are there. Which leads me to my next question. So I'm going to bring Felicia back up and just ask, can you talk a little bit more about what the National Organization of Disability does? Just and what you do at the organization. I know that it's a large organization that has been around that educates about the different disabilities that do exist, from an advocacy standpoint, from an educational standpoint, from an awareness standpoint. But can you talk about what you do and why it's important?
Sure. Thank you so much, Nicole. As you said, we are a 42-year-old nonprofit that works with all people with disabilities, advocates on behalf of all people with disabilities. Our former chairperson would say we were the only agnostic disability organization in the US, simply because we didn't focus on one aspect of disability. What we do is to really help to eliminate barriers for people with disabilities to go to work, to also, as I said, we have had a focus on education recently with coming out with findings on how we can really cross that bridge and build the bridge between disability services, student services, as well as companies to really bring out the fact that we're interested in all students. And we are particularly want to make sure that we are seeing all students, those with disabilities, as well as their non-disabled peers. Uh, we work specifically with companies, organizations, like, I'm so sorry, like Candace was saying, we partner. You have to really be, and I think Candace can speak to this, you have to be organizationally ready for us to come in, because we are looking at everything. How we partner with companies is in employer services, is by going in, looking at their policies, practice. Companies have to put together a cross-functional team to work with us in order to really establish that they have the foundation that they need in order to be effective in not only hiring people with disabilities, but retaining them. We have the right tools in place to recognize high potentials with disabilities. People are being promoted. We also do lots of different trainings. We have a free tool, which is the employment tracker for companies to use, which I oversee as well. That is a way for companies to really see, where are you as far as your disability inclusion strategy and work is concerned. Toyota started with that. And I do know their president at the time, he's the chairperson now of Toyota Motor Credit. Is that Toyota Motor North America Credit? Candace can go ahead and correct me, but he was very, very committed to making sure that they could move up. They could make sure, in looking at all of their policies, process, etc., that they were doing everything they needed to do. They didn't have a long way to go. It really is a fantastic organization, but there are still some things where companies have that gap. We also came out with an engagement survey this year, which we're very excited about. It is a way for companies to not only see how they're doing internally as far as the policies and processes concerned, but also to hear if the employees agree.
Thank you so much, Felicia, just for providing that context. I think that there are so many tools and resources that you all provide that employers can utilize. And, I think that that's the beautiful part about this conversation, is that you have an employer partner who has seen tangible results in becoming more intentional about becoming inclusive as not only a workforce, but just as an organization, as a community in general. So I'd like to just bring Candace up and, maybe we can have this conversation in tandem. So Felicia, I'll leave you up here, but Candace, what are you currently doing at Toyota North America? And can you discuss the work you do and how you work with the NOD? And, I'll kind of like flip back and ask Felicia on the opposite end, just about what strategies you all have seen be effective in your partnership. So Candace, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, absolutely. So I'll start with telling you a little bit more about my yay job, not my day job, but my yay job. And then I'll go into talking a little bit about the relationship and the fantastic partnership we have with Felicia and NOD. So I'll talk about my job from two different perspectives, internally and externally. So as a leader in the diversity and inclusion space at Toyota, it's primarily my job to partner with executives to help develop meaningful strategies. You heard me talk about not just strategy, but helping them take action in the diversity and inclusion space. This can look like things in the areas of workforce, right? What does your workforce look like? It could look like how they're showing up from an advocacy and support perspective as executives, how they're engaging with their team members. We also are very, very serious about our suppliers and the supplier diversity, where we spend our dollars, what do those suppliers look like, how can we partner with them. We have a fantastic mentor program so that we can help mentor other businesses, usually smaller businesses, right, that want to learn the Toyota way or learn how to do work that we do, but on a smaller scale, right? Our practices are very scalable. And so it's really helping our executives and really all of our employees infuse diversity and inclusion in all aspects of what we do at Toyota. On the external side, so that work that we do transcends into partnerships externally, right? So, and also areas like dealers, right? Our dealer partnerships, what we are doing in the communities in which we work and live. You see a lot of commercials and you read a lot about what Toyota does. I can tell you, as a 20-year employee at Toyota, one of the things I'm most proud of, in addition to the great work I get to do, is the great work I get to do in the community. Right. So whether it's having opportunities to speak like this or literally going in the community and doing things like food banks and toy drives and, things of that nature, we are very serious about our community partnerships, and we're very thoughtful and intentional about, the areas that, I'm sorry, I have a little pet gnat flying around in here. I have a plant in here. And so, we're very serious about the relationships and the partnerships we have in the community, and we definitely align those from a diversity perspective as well. When we look at a partner like NOD, and you heard Felicia mention this, we've started working with NOD, I believe it was about 2017, 2018, and it did start with the tracker. That was a great way for us to identify where we were doing well, so what strengths that we could serve up and celebrate and continue to do, but also what were the areas of opportunity. And Felicia hit on something really key in terms of, having that top of the house support. But what I would add to that is you have to have support across, not just the top of the house, but you have to have support across the organization. You do need to understand organizational readiness and where there are opportunities, right? You heard me talk about Toyota. It's a pretty big machine, right? Like we're not only sitting in offices doing strategic work, we're actually building cars, and we're actually doing things, that we have to be thoughtful about how we can infuse this strategy across the organization. So organizational readiness is extremely important. And when we think about our strategy, we need to think about where we may need to tweak it based on those different areas of the business. What I would also share is that when we're thinking about bringing the disabled employees into the workforce, we need to think about the entire life cycle. So we need to, and we do that, right, with non-disabled employees as well, but it doesn't change because a person is disabled, right? So we need to think about how we're recruiting, how we may need to recruit differently, how we may need to interview differently and prepare for interviews differently, the onboarding process, training and educating our managers, because I think people have the best of intentions. Like I really want to believe that people have the best of intentions, but they don't always know how to navigate certain situations. I have many years of experience in HR, so I often wear both hats. until where NOD comes in, and Felicia and her team have been great partners in helping us develop training and education as we prepare to onboard and really hire, right? Hire and onboard employees with disabilities, and even identify partners that can help us identify candidates, prepare candidates, partner and coach, the employees and the team members. And what I would say, over these last couple of years, we've seen opportunities probably like we haven't before, because we're now working from home, right? We have this hybrid, some of us are working in a hybrid space. So that opens up, I believe, another opportunity for us to really think about where we can look to hire people with disabilities. Perhaps there's a job that they can do from home that they, couldn't do in the office based on a disability. And now there's more of an appetite to really entertain that, because over the last couple of years, many of us have been having to work from home. So, that gives you a little bit of an overview of kind of what we do internally and externally, but I really do want to highlight and amplify our partnership with NOD, because it has really helped us, again, to identify those areas that we're doing well and that we can build on. At Toyota, we have a very Kaizen culture, which means Kaizen, the word Kaizen is a Japanese word for continuous improvement. So we're always about what can we do differently, and NOD and Felicia have been helpful in helping us identify those things that we can do differently and better.
And, Felicia, before we move on from what Candace said, I just want to first and foremost applaud the NOD for being really intentional, because Candace speaks with so much passion, so much intention about how she is seeing, a shift in culture. And when we talk about creating equity and overlooked spaces, that's the key component. So, I think that I'd like to just ask you just to follow up to Candace's point, just what strategies did you find effective in the beginning when you built this partnership with Toyota North America?
Thank you for that question, because it is really important. Like you said, we started with the tracker, but then they invited us in to come and tour and see the campus and really give some advice about accessibility. How are they doing overall? We met people, really just opened the doors, and allowed us in to become really a part of their team. So we gave them our findings. And when we went back a year later, all of the changes were made. It wasn't just one or two. They had made a major investment in accessibility for their buildings, and those changes were made because it's an oversight. We don't always think about whether or not we have the accessibility button. I worked for a very large staffing agency as their disability expert. My first day when I walked up to the building, there was no handicap button. No, don't use that word. But there was no accessible button. So, it's just an oversight. And I really want to amplify Candace's voice as far as, I really do believe that people have the best intentions. We just need to empower them with knowledge. And anytime that we can do that, then we see a difference. We really do. People feel more comfortable. They are going to come to the table and have those discussions. But that was number one. Number two, they had a team that was so committed to making this happen. And it was a cross-functional team. We had legal, we had HR, we had talent, we had everyone that we needed to be at the table and ready to work. This was not about having, discussions about how we could do, ABC. This was about, all right, this is where we are in our project plan, and these are the next steps that you need to take. They take that, go out, make whatever changes that they needed to do, we'd come back together and see, do you need additional supports, et cetera. So organizational readiness, the strategies around really understanding the employer, and then the employer being willing to really open up, have those conversations, and really have that level of, I don't want to say pride, it's not the right word, but the level of trust that they have in their employees to make those decisions. It was really, it has been a fantastic relationship.
Thank you so much just for providing that. It almost felt like going through a case study about what's possible. And that's what we want to introduce, or what we want to have in this conversation, is just what can employers who are joining us now or will be joining us when they tune in later are able to learn. I think that where I'd like to go next is just understanding or contextualizing this in the campus space. So Natalie, you attended Jackson State University, one of the largest HBCUs, has gotten a lot of attention over the years. And I think I just want to start by asking is, how can universities become more accommodating? And then I know I have a few follow-up questions for you. But I just like to start there. Like, what have you seen work? What have, what missteps have you seen? How have you seen things be overlooked? But I'll leave it there for you.
Yeah, so I definitely think that with Jackson State, their ADA accommodations services are amazing. Like the people that work there, Dr. Richardson, he's over the ADA accommodations lab. It's very, very helpful. And I think that what is so, I guess, disheartening is that even as great as they are at their job, and as amazing, as wonderful and helpful it was for me to be recognized by Dr. Richardson and everyone that worked there, a lot of students don't know about the services that are provided there. A lot of people don't know. They're kind of located in the student center, I believe, the second floor. They're tucked away. A lot of students that really would benefit from the accommodations, they don't know that they're even there to begin with. So I think that there was kind of, to me at least, it seemed like a lack of importance to the school as a whole to really aggressively put out there that this service was provided for students, and that they could go to help, and all of the things that they could go to get help for. So I think that if there was more of an emphasis placed on accommodations and what they are and what they provide, where you can get those accommodations, I think that would be really great, because they have a very well functional ADA accommodation services. So I think that also on campus, a lot of the buildings, with Jackson State being such a large campus, a lot of things break, and a lot of things are not done well, not upkept well sometimes. So for example, in the art building, there's about 3 floors, and they have an elevator, but that elevator from when I was there never worked. I could never use that elevator. And so there's a lot of other elevators around campus. The dining hall, for example, they don't work. And so how do you expect someone to get up the stairs to go to these buildings? I mean, the dining hall, very important that you have students able to access the dining hall. Not having the ability for students to just basically navigate the campus with it feeling like such a large campus, that's really important. I would say even with the campus being so spread out, there were classes that you have to take that are completely off campus. So they have a shuttle that you can get on, and the shuttle, the hours, number one, are they're very strange hours to begin with. And so, someone might have a really hard time getting on the shuttle because there's no space for, say, like a wheelchair, or there's no way to get someone into that shuttle. And the shuttle drivers they get there and they pull off immediately within 2 minutes. And so that's not enough time to get someone into the shuttle if they needed help. I think that those are kind of the immediate things that stick out to me. And I think that also with this conversation of careers, it would be very helpful to the whole idea of having careers that disabled people know that there are careers out there for them. And I think for me, with a invisible disability, I think my biggest regret is I did not know that there are careers that are not very good for you to be in if you have these needs that you need to be met. And I think that you struggle a lot because you're held to the same standard as someone else who might not have these limitations. And especially when you're in a space that's not exactly open-minded, it can be really hard to voice your needs, and have those needs met. And so, like, with the career fairs and things like that, that's not really kept in mind there. And I think it would be really helpful if there was, a section for um, careers that are, friendly for people with disabilities, so that it doesn't feel so isolating and it doesn't feel so intimidating. And I think that it should really be stressed to students not to get so panicked about. I think it's really hard in general right now to find jobs. And so when you get offered that job, you jump at it. You're like, oh, okay, but it's very important to take those things into consideration, because it's a big commitment to make. And I think that I would have benefited from more discussions and, um, definitely having that being taken into consideration.
Natalie, I want to just first and foremost thank you for not only being vulnerable, but also being solution oriented. I think that as many know, many historically Black colleges and universities are typically underfunded, under-resourced, and you walking us through what life like on an HBCU campus is like, where sometimes the heat goes out, sometimes the elevator goes out, and when you think about how that impacts someone who may need something, like as simple as a meal, to fulfill their body, it introduces a larger conversation. But beyond that, to contextualize that into a place of, well, hey, we spend these 4, 5, or 6 years on a campus, we graduate, and then what happens? I think that it's so important. And when we created HBCU 20 by 20, that was created in mind is just, how do we get from high school to college and then college into career? And I see that they listed you as a fellow of HBCU 20 by 20 because you did participate in one of our fellowship programs. And I think that those fellowship programs operate as a foot in the door, a foot into what's possible. And I just want to first and foremost just say that I'm just proud of your journey. I'm proud of your advocacy. And I'm just proud that you're a part of this conversation, because so often we don't get to hear from the student voices. And, for the students that are on, for example, like Josh Cruz, who asked a question, it was pointed directly for you, is just, how did you find mentors on campus? How do you navigate the community as someone with a disability? And, I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because there are students who may have like an office tucked away that, like on their campus and don't know about it, and they spend 4 years in isolation, not knowing, that there are people for them. So can you just talk a little bit more about what that was like for you, navigating that, figuring out how to get your foot in the door, so that you're at the Michigan Chronicle now, doing work for the Michigan Chronicle, so can you talk a little bit more about that to our audience?
So for me, how I found I have many mentors, and the way I was able to find those mentors is because I'm very authentically myself, and when I feel things, I say them. And a lot of people really like that quality. A lot of people don't like that quality, but I think that it's very important when you're in a space where, for example, the way I found Dr. Richardson as one of my mentors at Jackson State. I had submitted my accommodation form to all of my professors. Most of them signed them, and then, set up a meeting with me so that we could see what I needed for that semester. I had a few professors that told me that, they didn't respond very well to those accommodations. They were telling me that they wouldn't provide those accommodations. I didn't need those accommodations. I seemed fine to them. And that really scared me, I guess, because now I'm thinking, okay, well, I have a semester with this professor. I'm really nervous. I don't know what to do, and they're denying my accommodations. And so I found Dr. Richardson, his name on the form as like someone as a point of contact. And I went over to the accommodation center, or I think I set up a Zoom, or I called him. It was something that was very personal, not just an email. And I let him know I was in a very clear state of anxiety, and I just let him know everything that I was really worried about, and I let him know everything that happened. And from that point on, everything that I needed, he was able to provide for me. And for my entire time at Jackson State, he was always stepping in to make sure that I had what I needed. I think that the more you're around these people, like anytime you go to someone for help, and that is exactly how I had all my mentors. Anytime I went to someone for help and they fixed the problem, I kept their contact information, and that was the one person that I went to every single time I needed help. If I needed help with, and it was I needed help with the liberal arts department, I went to one lady every single time. And with my minor being studio art, if I had an issue there, I always went to this one person. And I think that that really helps you find mentors. If you meet someone and they're attentive, if they care about you, if they take an interest in your specific story, get their contact information and make sure that's the one person you go to. And then just swing by their office sometime and just sit and talk to them. I think with the ADA accommodations, they have a lab that students, it specifically has computers and desks, and it's for students to go sit if they need a quiet place with completely soundproof, just go in and sit down and do your work. And, when you're in the lab all the time, you see other people coming in, other administrators that work with ADA accommodations, and that's kind of how I was able to find my mentors. And it's very, very important to keep those mentors, especially if you're at an HBCU where sometimes things can easily slip under the rug because the school is so big and there's so many students that are bringing all of these issues to someone's attention. It's a really easy and it's a very helpful way to have your needs met as soon as they can, because if you have built up a relationship with this person, if you go to them and you have an issue, they're going to find the quickest way to get that done. And if you go to someone who like someone who's generally supposed to handle all these issues, you might be pushed to the back a little bit. So yeah, I think that is how I picked up all my mentors. I have so many people at Jackson State that looked out for me. I wouldn't even be here today if it wasn't for one of my mentors, which was my media production professor. I had so many classes with him, and I told him, my major was very news focused, and I told him I'm not that interested in reporting. I kind of want to go into this section. And so he sent me, HBCU 20 by 20 was collaborating with DreamWorks. And so he sent me that application, and he did that for me. He doesn't do that for all his students, but I had come to him multiple times with these issues that I faced, and then we ended up really bonding. So yeah, I think it can really open doors for you to keep those mentors very close.
Thank you so much just for providing that context and just sharing again your experience and how important it is to have a mentor. Also, like that key, we also talk about that a lot in our fellowship programs, following up and maintaining those relationships. So you didn't hear it from HBCU 20 by 20, you heard it from Natalie. So, it's not being repeated over and over again from us because, we could say it till we're blue in the face. So thank you, Natalie, for that. To our audience, if you have questions, we encourage you to, okay, I didn't even have to do it. You all have already beat me to it. Okay, if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I am going to bring all of our panelists back up, I guess, including myself, so that we can just continue the conversation. Natalie, I have a question for you could you share some of your favorite social media accounts that advocate for people with disabilities?
So honestly, I can't list them off the top of my head. I would have to go back on my phone and find them, especially because I use TikTok a lot. A lot of times the content that you see is just the algorithm repeating like things that you've liked in the past. So a lot of times these creators just make their way back to my page over and over again. But yeah, I can definitely go look and then drop some in the chat. Or even you could connect with me on LinkedIn. I could share some with you.
I know that's right. Build your network. But also, we'll also compile a list as well of resources from all of our panelists, and everyone will receive that toolkit at the end so that we can ensure that you all are also walking away with something tangible. I saw a question very early on, and this is from Michael, but just, you know, are there any legislation on Capitol Hill that are focused around DEI and the disability community? And, you know, he says, as a neurodiverse African-American Black male traversing the world has been an uphill battle. And Michael, I'm happy that you mentioned that. We actually just spent the day before yesterday on Capitol Hill meeting with Congresswoman Alma Adams' office, who chairs the HBCU caucus. And, you know, for us, figuring out how we can serve not only the HBCU, but the Black community in more intentional ways from a legislative perspective is also something that's important to us, that we're continuing to advocate for, and we're really excited about those relationships that we're building on the Hill. But I'd like to just see if anyone wanted to address that question. Felicia, do you all have like any lobbyists, or are you all on the Hill advocating for any legislation that way?
Yeah, thank you so much. As a nonprofit, we're not, I think, we can't be lobbyists, but we certainly do advocate. um, we are really, really excited. We have former Congressman Jim Langevin joining our board, and he is going to lead our policy discussions. So we've been very actively engaged with policy for many, many years, working on behalf of all Americans, again, with disabilities that are being paid sub-minimum wage. Legally, as well as really expanding Medicaid benefits, et cetera. This is really something, though, as far as the intersectionality is concerned, that we all need to continue to have this conversation. And we need to think about working together to bring that legislation forward with all of our networks, because it is really important. The ADA, Americans with Disability Act, is for everyone, protects everyone with disabilities. But you do have to self-identify in order to be protected under the ADA. And it's against the law for companies to discriminate against you, but we all know what happens every day.
Thank you so much, Felicia, for answering that question. Natalie, another question I'd like just to share your way is just what advice do you have for students that are not as confident just to ask for help? And I know that I'm doing this kind of like rapid spitfire style, so just any thoughts or ideas that you may have centered around that?
So I actually was not confident asking for help either. My mom works at Jackson State, so she worked at the college that I was at. And so a lot of these things came because I told my mom about them. And then she said, well, you need to go to this person. And I just had a parent that pushed me a lot to like speak up. But I think that if you're not as confident to ask for help, I think that an email is really good. I think that you don't have to include like necessarily, you don't have to be as vulnerable or include like, it doesn't have to be this gut-wrenching, the way that I would go to them and say like, oh, I feel this way. I think it's really useful to just use that, put it in writing. And in general, it's good to put things in writing just so that people can come back to it. But I think that just sending that email is really impactful, and it's a lot less heavy on your nerves if you're not that comfortable going up to someone and speaking to them.
And Natalie, I think that kind of answers Michelle's question that's also in the chat or in the Q&A box, just about how difficult it is navigating college, for her daughter who's a Black woman with a chronic disability, and I love the fact that you talked about the importance of sending emails, almost creating like that paper trail, because, there's a few things that you can't deny. And it's, if you sent emails, you've sent messages, you've left voicemails, you're protecting yourself that way, or Michelle, in your case, you're protecting your daughter that way. So I just wanted to share that. We have one last question, and that question is just if you know of any resources where you can learn about ASL and building that skill. I almost kind of want to ask Derek or Ambrose if they have any resources as they are still a part of this conversation. So Ambrose or Derek, do you have any kind of advice you have for anyone looking to become an ASL interpreter?
I will just volunteer that I started learning sign language on YouTube when I was 16 years old. And that is how I started my career. It's free and, YouTube University, magna cum laude. Just get that free stuff.
Thank you for sharing that. And our last question I see here is, how would you say is the best way the U.S. can encourage more youth and individuals of disabilities in U.S. politics? So again, like that advocacy piece, Felicia, if you'd like to take us home just with how youth can be more involved. And I think Natalie talked about it a little bit more and utilizing your voice on social media, but any other ways that you advise?
Vote, rev up the vote. Absolutely.
Rev up the vote.
Rev up the vote. AAPD.org has a program called Rev Up the Vote. So bring it out on the campuses. Let's all vote. We desperate need to vote. And this is how it's for anyone that's watching. When I do this, I'm actually clapping for people when they are saying something that really resonates with me. And I mean, I think I would have been doing this the whole time for you, Natalie. Really, you, brava. Very nice.
Thank you.
Well, let's all go ahead and give a round of applause for our panelists. I think that we have covered so much ground. There is so much that we could talk about, but I just want to again thank Natalie, thank Felicia, thank Candace. Dr. Johnson, if you have any last words that you'd like to offer us, you kicked us off. Go ahead and take us home.
Definitely. Thank you so much for everyone who's coming. Because of events like these, we've also altered policies here at HBCU 20 by 20 in the application. So we have something like called the HBCU 20 by 20 tour, in which we visit around 15 to 20 HBCUs per academic year. When we visit those HBCUs, we do visit the disability office. We don't just stop at the career centers or the classrooms. We also have fellowship programs at the beginning of our fellowship programs, and this is new. We ask students if they have a disability in which they may need more resources for, or just to make sure that they are able to matriculate through the program. Let us know. This is all confidential. We also talk and meet with that employer to see if they can, be able to meet the services. And also provide resources to the specific student who's looking to work with them. And again, this just came because we had students in our programs, and this was something that we didn't think to ask, but we now ask this. In addition to that, we also share resources and host events like this to make sure that we serve all of the Black and Brown community. This is really, really important with us. This is not just like, hey, this it's not just a one-time off thing. It's the reason why we use this as the start to Black History Month, because we want people to know that this is an issue. And we hope that we continue this conversation. And please know that HBCU 20 by 20 and the application is here as a resource. Thank you all for your time.